Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new edition of the Behind the Curtin podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and I'm alongside my good friend Paul Murphy. Murph, football is back.
Football is back, and even college football is back in a big way this year, especially with the release of NCAA College Football 25. That's put a little bit of a skip into people's steps here a little bit, but a lot of buzz going around the college football season. The first year of expansion to the 12 playoff teams. The NIL is in full force across the country, and it's like it or not, it's here to stay. But it's definitely changing the landscape, and not so much for the better in some ways, but in some other ways, more exciting for the fans, especially with expanding to 12 teams this year.
It is certainly a new era for college football, a new era for college sports as well. You mentioned NCAA coming back, which is great, and getting teams and players involved is spectacular for everybody involved. NIL is not going away anytime soon. It might look a little different with the salaries coming soon as well. But when it's all said and done, college football is back. College sports seasons are well underway. We're recording this as North Dakota State and Colorado are playing. So we'll probably give some updates as that's going on, despite this being published after the game is well over. But again, football is back. Penn State's at West Virginia, and what's going to be an incredible time in Morgantown for college football and for West Virginia, and for Penn State to be a part of it too. And I think that's one of those things that now, it's a game that you're not really going to see much anymore. You mentioned the Power Four schools, the 12-team playoff. Wins are at a premium. You want that at-large bid if you can't make it to the playoff as a conference champion. For Penn State, they can't afford an early season loss because they most likely will have a schedule that features one of, or two of, or even three of Oregon, USC, Michigan, Ohio State, teams like that. And that's not something that's easy to navigate during the college football landscape the way that it is.
Yeah, definitely, especially in Penn State's. We look back at the past few years, and I believe that like 4 of the last 6 years they would have been in the top 12 and would have made the football playoffs. And as you know, of course, as a sore point with us Penn State faithful, it's 10-2, 10-2, 10-2, and so now with, as you said, scheduling these home and homes like I did with Auburn, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, and now that's going to go by the wayside here. Up to a larger number of teams in the conference. You simply can't afford to lose. If you're going to lose, you got to lose to one of the teams that's going to be in the top 12 in your own conference. Penn State's very good at doing that with the results of the Michigan and Ohio States of the last 6 years to 8 years. But it's a new era. Penn State coming into the season. They did lose a bunch of good guys on defense. But they're coming in here with new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Thankfully, Mike Yurchik is no longer in the program, and there are some excitement with Andy Kotonicki coming over from Kansas. But you're installing a new offense. You're on the road against West Virginia, a great environment to play in, and it's. Obviously been paying attention to the Twitter banner going over here in the last week or so. Some of the West Virginia players and fans are a little irritated because it was the start of Bro Probola coming in and covering the spread for Penn State, and it's 4 out of 5 games at the end. So they're using that as their rallying cry. You got the defensive back who transferred from Northwestern. Penn State doesn't respect anybody if you're not Ohio State, Michigan. And last I checked, they lost by 4 touchdowns last year to Penn State. So what sort of respect there at Northwestern? So yeah, exciting opening weekend for Penn State.
Yeah, I think it's a great first test. Again, they're going to be rare moving forward because, and unlike the other schools, the Big Ten plays a 9-game conference schedule, and that's not easy either. Obviously, there's a little bit more flexibility with an 8-game schedule like the SEC does, but I'm hopeful that this adds back into the Pennsylvania Football Network as far as what now, instead of scheduling in West Virginia, you schedule a Robert Morris, a Duquesne, a St. Francis FCS school. If you're going to schedule one that's a PA school. You're still going to beat them pretty good, but keep that money in state and in the Commonwealth. And I think that could be a really good situation moving forward. But again, the college football landscape has changed. It's evolving right before our eyes, and it's going to be very interesting to see what's next, where the next trend goes, and how that all comes forth. I'm very interested to see the opt-outs versus the bowl games this year compared to last year, and the way that the 12-team playoff is set up and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. As you know, last year in the Ole Miss game, Penn State went to the bowl game. They had a lot of guys opting out, and some guys that understandable, some guys not understandable. In fact, the ones that were not understandable tended to almost not get drafted in the draft, and then got cut to practice squads and stuff. So, it's a whole different era now. You never used to have this, but now guys are, they're protecting their future, so to speak, and stuff. But now, with the 12 teams in there, you got 4 games that first round, and some of these guys are. It is going to be interesting to see if they still continue to play in the playoff games, and then it's going to be yeah. I don't know how it's going to pan out, but got to get there first. It starts this Saturday.
That's right. So, what are you most excited for this college football season?
So I think that if you look at the last few weeks since camp opened with Penn State, obviously installing a new offense with Coach K coming over, and from everything that I've been reading and stuff, like Allard has kind of taken on a more vocal approach. I know last year he's the quiet type of kid, shy kind of kid, and he did get a lot of undeserved criticism for that last year. But then again, some of it matched his play down the stretch with what was going on. So, there were some things to that. So I think I'm most excited now to see a couple things, actually 3 things on offense. One is, how's this new offense going to fit in, and how's that going to go around? Obviously, the big question mark, which has been the question mark for the last couple of years, is the wide receiver room. They've added Julian Fleming into the mix, and Liam Clifford, from what I understand, has been having a great camp. I don't know how much of that is coach speak from Coach James, but it would be nice to see somebody step up. Amaro Evans, Trey Wallace, Caden Sanders has been dinged up. So I'm worried. I don't want to say I'm worried, but I'm anxious to see how the wide receiver room shakes out this year. And then third, and probably the most important part for these other things to work, once again, is your offensive line. Got a lot of moving parts. Troutline and Franklin have both come out and said we could see as many as 8 different linemen playing this week against West Virginia. And Jarrod, from the quarterback position, if you say you have 2 quarterbacks, that usually translates into you don't have one. So I don't know quite how to take that. Hey, we got 8 guys, but there has been some good reviews. So I think that's what I'm most excited about, is to watch from the offensive. Defensive, I'm not really even concerned about the defense. Tom Allen brings an energy to the defense. I don't think we're going to be taking a step back whatsoever from Manny Diaz. Manny got some great guys in here, and Tom Allen's going to be the beneficiary of that here in his first season as defensive coordinator.
No, I think those are some good points. And we're going to talk about what it's going to take for Penn State to win in Morgantown when we come back for the second segment of the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Behind the Curtain podcast on Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Murph. I'm Jarrod. Milan Pusker Stadium is not going to be an easy place to play. It's certainly not an easy place on a regular Saturday, but this Saturday is a little different. All eyes are on Morgantown. I'm sure that Clemson and Georgia are playing at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. I think that the Bulldogs are going to woof, woof, woof all over the Clemson Tigers, much like they do in front of traffic cops. But it's going to be one of those situations where the game of the day is, in fact, in Morgantown. You got the big noon kickoffs. The game's going to take about 95 hours. It won't end until Monday. Thank God it's Labor Day weekend. But you got the Pat McAfee show. You got schools closing down.
You remember the last school that did that?
Maryland, yeah, that's right. They got thumped 59-0. Michael Loxley, I'm sure, loves it.
They left at halftime.
Right? So it's just going to be one of those things now where Penn State, I think if there's a team that's equipped to go into an environment like this, it is Penn State. And I think on the flip side, I don't know that West Virginia is ready to play in an atmosphere like this. It's going to be loud on both sides of the football. I'm sure they want people to be quiet, but it's noon. People will have been drinking since the sun rose. And it's essentially an all-weekend party. So it'll be interesting to see the atmosphere. We moved up our little caravan to drive down from Altoona up a couple minutes so that we can hopefully beat some traffic. But it's going to be a live environment, and I think that environment's what's going to make it really, really tough for Penn State.
Yeah, you know the track record here with Penn State opening on the road in the last 15 years in the Big Ten. It's something like 12 of the last 15 or 11 of the last 14, something crazy like that. So Coach Franklin did come out here yesterday or the day before and basically made the comment, hey, we're equipped to play in an environment first game of the year on the road. So he would thank the Big Ten for that, obviously, sarcastically, for helping him prepare for this. But I think the big X factor this Saturday is going to be, from what I've been seeing, is the weather, and it looks like it's going to be a rainy, soggy day. And I think, to be honest with you, I think that benefits the Penn State team more than anything because you got two backs there with Kaytron Allen, Nick Singleton. The offensive line the defensive line for West Virginia is not that good. So if it comes down to a matter of just playing ball control, protecting the football, Penn State can do that. Drew Aller showed last year that if you need him to throw the ball, it was basically his best game of the year. It was 21 to 29 for 325 and 3 touchdowns. So I think if Penn State can come out, control the momentum, I'd say let's make it a 17-7 game at halftime, Penn State, and then in the end they just went ball control. I'm honestly looking for Penn State. You know, it's not going to be like it was last year. They're not going to come in here and beat them by 23 points, 24 points. I honestly think Penn State wins this game. I think the rushing attack is going to be the key, and I got Penn State winning this one 24-17.
I have it 34-17. And I think it's because for me, I expect Penn State to get on early. They've struggled getting on the board early, but in an environment like this, you got to take the crowd out of it immediately. I'm very interested to see what Andy Kotelnicki does with Singleton and Kaytron Allen, because I don't know that Mike Yurcich did. I mean, he did. Not that I don't know. He did not use them well at all, especially when it mattered the most. So I'm interested to see what he's able to do to get them isolated. In space. And if it's wet and rainy and miserable, which it's projected to be, which is a shame. But I want to see them ground and pound. You can also use Tyler Warren as well. But one of
the freshman tight ends are getting some
spotlight here. Andrew Rapplier is getting some love.
And Reynolds.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, the tight ends room is strong. There's a lot of question marks in the wideout room, as there have been for what seems like forever, really since Dotson and KJ Hamler and those guys. It's just a perpetual question mark. You would like to see Trey Wallace be the guy. I think he can be. Amari Evans, Caden Saunders, like you mentioned, And then you also have Julian Fleming. He came back to Penn State or came back to Pennsylvania, and I'm interested to see the impact that he has. He was in a loaded receivers room at Ohio State, so it'll be neat to see how they factor him into the game. And then everybody's been loving Liam Clifford, so that's a factor too, and it'll be interesting to see again how they use those guys. Now, if the weather is nasty, then I think they're going to be neutralized. But Penn State's not afraid to throw the football. You mentioned defensively. I don't think that there's much to worry about. I'm very excited to see Abdul Carter with his fingers in the ground, and coming off that edge. That's going to be some nasty stuff. That's not something they had last year from Aller, or I'm sorry, from Abdul Carter. And then you got Tony Rojas and Kobe King. And then you've got KJ Winston in the back end as well, and Dom DeLuca. So Penn State defensively, I think, is really good. The secondary, I think, is even better than it was last year, even with sending guys to the league. So I think Penn State wins handily. I think it's going to be close, but I think that their skill position just outlasts them late in the game.
Well, I touched on something there with KJ Winston. He's a big guy back there at the safety spot. But I'm really excited to watch Zakee Wheatley this year. He's shown us flashes in the limited time that he's been on the field, and I think he's a more athletic. And I know this is kind of hard to imagine, but I think he's a more athletic version of Jaquan Brisker. The guy's got it. He just makes plays.
I love that reference, and I love that comparison because I completely agree.
He's always got a nose for the ball. He's always around the ball. He's always making plays. And this should be his junior year coming up here, and I think he's ready to step into the spot, and I think he's ready to go. So, the defensive end position, obviously they did lose some guys here for some transgressions with Jaleel Lyons and the linebacker, but the one place they can afford to lose somebody was those positions. So I think that the key here is going to be containing Garrett Reed. I mean, the kid can run. I'm not sold on him as a passer, even though he had some good games last year as a passer. But
yeah, the Big 12 is a crapshoot.
Yeah. So, I mean, Penn State definitely has the athletes to, run a QB contain on him and try to contain him to the pocket as much as they can. I don't expect the WV run game, aside from Green, to do much this year.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points. And I think that's the other thing, too, is, Green's a solid quarterback. He's a solid Big 12 quarterback. He put up some serious yards, 2,500 yards, probably could have got to 3,000 if he stayed healthy. And that's no small task. But I would force him to beat you with his arm. Sure. Test it early, neutralize their run game, and force them to throw the ball in the air and put them in a position where they have to come from behind and are forced to pass. And I think if they can do that, even despite the weather, I think that's a really good situation for Penn State.
Yeah, and it goes to back what you said. If they can get on the board early and kind of clamp down a little bit and force them into passing the ball from come from behind, I think they're going to have a huge advantage there with Penn State's defense. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see, the Tom Allen defense as well. I think it's going to be a little bit more of the same that we've come to expect the last couple of years from this defense. But obviously the offense this year is where all the eyes are going to be.
One of the fascinating things that I'm just kind of sitting here thinking about is how people were very worried when Brent Pry left and took the head coaching job at Virginia Tech. What was going to happen to the defense? The defense got better under Manny Diaz, in my opinion.
Definitely. Definitely.
And that's not a knock on Brent Pry. Altoona native, much love, right? Obviously. But Manny Diaz got that team to be better. I think I don't think there's a fallback option for this defense. I think that Tom Allen's going to have them, if not as good as, they will be better than they were under Manny Diaz. And that's not an easy task by any means, but it's refreshing that Penn State can just plug and play defensive coordinators in like they have for the last few years.
Sure. If we can only parlay that into getting us some good wide receiver room, and having, we don't have to be at the Ohio State level, but if we could get somewhere between the Penn State level and the Ohio State level, somewhere in between, just don't have that one guy on that room. So it's always, I think you agree with me there, and I agree with what you said. So defense is not a concern, it's not a worry. It's right back to the same old that we've been looking at for the last few years. And just trying to get this wide receiver room to step up.
And the problem with the receiver room is there's not been consistency. You've gone through quite a bit of turnover at the coaching position. Obviously, you had David Corley, which wasn't great. Jarrod Parker, to name a few. Marcus Hagens now, and obviously I'm Stubblefield. Taylor Stubblefield here just a few years ago, but there's just been not a lot of consistency there for a receivers room that was pumping out some serious talent there from 2016 on, and that's not something that should happen. That fall off at the receiver position has not been good for them, and it showed in their play. Obviously, you saw what happened in 2020, you saw what happened in 2021, and even last year there wasn't a number one guy. Yeah. So I mean, you need that receiver room to really take a step and make some plays here this year.
I think Fleming, and I'm not a huge Fleming guy. I didn't, get over it. That's what I got to tell myself. He kind of played Penn State a little bit there and where he went and stuff. But he's coming back into the room here. And I think that being a fifth-year senior, bringing some of that experience that he's learned under Hartline at Ohio State, and what it takes over there. And obviously you got this plethora of wide receivers to choose from there. But I think Fleming's going to be a big addition to this team, and I think he's going to bring an element that has been lacking. And what I'm referring to is Keandre Lambert-Smith. You watch Keandre Lambert-Smith, and he had the potential, but then he would pop, and then he wouldn't get the games. And then he'd take a stupid 15-yard penalty personal foul. I mean, I saw him do it 3-4 times, and I just don't think that he was. I don't know. He just wasn't a leader.
Right, and that's absolutely right.
Yeah. So
that's where I think that I agree. I think that's where Fleming can step in the most. They need a leader in that room that's been there before, that's been in a position to lead and had success leading. I'm not saying that he's a leader in a receivers room that had guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba, but he knows what it takes to get to that level. He's seen that work ethic, that talent up close and in person, and having that guy in your room, in your receivers room, I think is only going to add, to that. So I think that's exactly what they need from him. Even if he doesn't put up stats, I think 750 yards to 1,000 plus is a great season for him. And getting him involved in that aspect, but the off the field stuff is where they need him the most. To be perfectly honest with you, and that's really weird to say about a receivers group that's not great. It hasn't been great recently, but that stuff matters.
Yeah, definitely does, especially now with the schedule that they have coming up. And trying to get into that playoff. It's always been where, you get down to the season, you get to the middle there, and then you got a loss to Ohio State, you got a loss to Michigan. You can still make that up. You still have to play USC. You can still work your way into this, and it's going to be an interesting season. I mean, until they prove that they can beat Ohio State, I'm still looking at a 10-2 season. I don't think they get past Ohio State. USC is going to be a tough game. They're going to be.
Not sure if you hear. My dogs don't agree with your decision at 10-2. So clearly, they're frustrated at that. They know that I'm going 11-1. I do think that they're losing in Ohio State. But a little interruption never hurt, I guess. Little late night action with the dogs, but they have to beat Ohio State. This is the year to do it. USC is going to be tough, but I think there are a lot of question marks. Oregon, same deal. Not necessarily Oregon. Washington. Washington's a perennial power, but they lost half their team and their coach. So I don't know what Jed Fish is going to be able to do up there. Dan Lanning in Oregon, I think Oregon and Ohio State could very easily be the Big Ten championship game, depending on how things go. But for Franklin, you have to go 10-2, 11-1, regardless. But you have to. To me, 11-1 is very achievable. You have to, it's simple. Beat Ohio State. If you beat Ohio State this year, I think you warm the seat gets cooler. And then if you beat Ohio State, you're probably in the playoff.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. If you beat Ohio State, there may be a loss out there. It could be USC, but if you have that loss and you roll yourself into the playoffs where anything can happen, you can host a game. What's better than hosting a game in December in the snow and it's 25 degrees out?
Imagine an SEC team coming to Beaver Stadium.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm referring to. So that's exciting, and who knows? I may even have to make the trip from the desert to come see that. And,
can you handle that type of cold?
Well, I'll tell you what. We are actually, there's 7 of us, of my boys and their significant others and my little grandson. We're all making a trip to Purdue to see the Penn State Purdue game in November. So that's going to be a test right there, because that's going to be bad enough.
That's fair. But enough about this. We're going to get to our third and final segment here when we come back from this break on the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Behind the Curtain podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. I'm Jarrod. He is Murph. And we want to take the time to dedicate this third segment to a friend of ours who passed away tragically before the Penn State season began. One of the biggest fans Penn State I've ever seen, regardless of good, bad, and different Penn State football, Ben Schaefer. And I'll let Murph get into what he wanted to say, but we just want to take this time to dedicate this segment and really the season in his memory. And when we talk about Penn State football, always have him on our minds.
Yeah, absolutely, Jarrod. So I've known Ben ever since Ryan was playing senior baseball, and Ben came up. He's only a couple of years older than my son, and Ben never met a conversation he didn't like, and it just he had the gift of gab. He actually worked with my ex, and we would coach against each other, so he'd always be going and asking how much I was talking about baseball, and he'd start talking baseball to her. And it's just like, I got to listen to this Paul all night long, let alone having to listen to him at work and stuff. But as the years went by, and I got a chance to know Ben and watch Ben, and on the field he was doing whatever he thought was best, and people didn't know how to take him with how he was, but he meant well. And I will say this, and I actually made a Facebook post of this here last week. That when people do things, you get somebody like Ben who had no kids involved at all, and he took over and just coached everywhere, and he's got such a following of people that he's met, and not just Altoona, but Hollidaysburg and Bellwood and Claysburg. Like, it wasn't confined to just Altoona, and that says a lot. It says a lot about a guy. The guy had a heart of gold, and everything. And I did say in my Facebook post that you can really get the test of a man in the mark he leaves on it when he's no longer here. And after watching the vigil they had for the Altoona area Latino League, the Babe Ruth League out of sites, just all the comments and stuff I saw on Facebook, Ben did exactly that. And a huge Penn State fan. Always had a huge tailgate. Always liked to do all the cooking. Anytime I ever said anything to him, he'd be like, "Hey, if you're back for a Penn State game, make sure you look us up. Come hang out at the tailgate." So, Ben, it's you're going to be getting the best seat in the house this year and watching the games and stuff. But we just wanted to give a shout out to you. It was a sudden and unexpected loss. And he's missed by a lot of people, and I just thought it would be a good way to end our first segment of the year with giving a shout out to Ben and the legacy he left on people in the baseball community.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Obviously, as a coach and player, I've seen and been around Ben as well, on the field and off the field. And, obviously being only a couple years younger than him, you grow up together and it's just one of those things. And you take for granted, I think, too many times, that life isn't forever. You take for granted that every moment isn't guaranteed. And I learned that the hard way when I was younger.
Sure.
And you go through those moments and you wonder why things happen. And to me, when it's your time, it's your time, and it might not be fair to other people, to those in your life. But at the same time, that's when our number's called, and there's only so much you can do about it. In fact, you can't do anything about it, really. And that's the harsher thing of life. But if you live every day to make a difference in the world like Ben did, and I firmly believe that, with the impact that he made as a player, as a coach, and as a fan, and even as an umpire, in a good way, because there have been some pretty bad umpires, as I know you can attest, to people that you've yelled at and screamed at. But yeah, if you work every day to make a difference in somebody's life, then it's a life well lived. Just to make an impact in one person's life is a life well lived. And Ben, albeit short, I think it was a life very, very well lived.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with that said, that's all we've got for this week. We'll catch you again next week when we recap what happened in Morgantown and preview Penn State's first home game of the season. For Paul Murphy, this has been Jarrod Prugar on the Behind the Curtain podcast. We'll talk to you again next week.